Minette Batters, a decade at the NFU, 6 years at the top as president. What has been your biggest achievement to date? And what has been your biggest downfall?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, it's hard, I guess, to put everything together of what I feel the NFU's done. We've had some massive legal wins that have been huge for our members. But I think the policy, the campaigning, the comms, bringing all of that together, probably getting 1 million people to back our food standards petition when we were in lockdown. Don't forget, we'd gone into lockdown in the March with COVID, and there were so many things going on, not least that we were all working from our homes. We couldn't lobby anybody, we couldn't meet with anybody. And we had President Trump and Prime Minister Johnson determined to conclude a US trade deal in August. And so getting that standards campaign off the ground from home, getting everybody that came in to be a part of that, all farming organisations, all NGOs, chefs, Jamie Oliver to write an open letter, and then working with the Mail on Sunday, and the numbers just ticked up and up. And at one point we weren't getting anywhere, so we got everybody to email their MP if they wanted to. 80,000 emails went to MPs. And yeah, I feel, that definitely played a massive part in us never importing hormone-treated beef or chlorine-washed chicken, and the current Prime Minister has put that in writing. So that felt pretty massive. And
in terms of any regrets or anything that you wish you got over the line, what would you say, if there was one?
I think nothing is ever as good as you want it to be. So, we have worked on wherever there is a problem, whatever sector, and we represent huge diversity from a horticultural board, our poultry board, through to livestock, dairy, crops, and everything else in between. So you never get everything you want, but I think we are constantly moving the dial forwards, and so there's always an element of regret in that, well, it could have been better. But I think how I try and measure it is, if the NFU wasn't there, who would do it? I mean, things like the situation with British Sugar and bringing them back in, finalising the contractual agreement, the avian flu compensation legal case, taking the government to court. There's countless things whereby I tend to look at it, if it wasn't for the NFU, then who?
You've worked with several Secretary of States. Was there one individual that you found was the most challenging to work with? Who was that? And in terms of the current Secretary of State and the Prime Minister, do you feel they really grasp what agriculture is all about?
So, I mean, that Liz Truss moment, 49 days, when Ranald Jawadna came into DEFRA, was all about harmonising Department of International Trade and DEFRA. That felt very sort of febrile, really. It felt a very odd and challenging environment. And it was such a whirlwind and so short. It was over sort of before it had started. And I can remember taking Ranald out, party conference, on farm, going to the maddocks, trying to explain the situation with seasonal workers. And it's sort of going right over his head. So that felt a very, very challenging time. As for, Rishi Sunak, very, very different to his predecessors. So, he did the hustings. Obviously, Liz Truss did that. We were really keen to get a hustings with both of them. He committed at our headquarters right here that he would take a different approach to trade. He would host a food security summit. He would set a new self-sufficiency target with annual reporting. That is still yet to happen. I really think it's essential that it does, because otherwise food production becomes a poor relation. But he definitely has presented a different agenda. He's taken a different outlook on trade. He's recently walked away from the enhanced relationship with Canada because they were determined to get hormone-treated beef onto our marketplace. So yeah, I think very, very different to Sunak government to that of Truss and Johnson. Steve Barclay, I think, if I'm honest, it's early days, and he is in the final throes of this parliament. So he is limited as to actually what he can achieve. And I mean, his line to me, and I know to other people, has been, what quick wins can we get over the line in the time that's left? So, he's obviously the one that I've got to know the least because he's been in for such a short amount of time. And I think he's limited in what he can achieve. Although, we are continually seeing an uplift in the SFI payments, the opening up of options, still quite a lot unknown though, coming forwards as we go into the summer.
You became the first female NFU president. You said at the time you didn't want that to define you. I'm just interested in terms of your time over your tenure, have you experienced any misogyny or sexism that you felt that, it was an issue and something that you wanted to highlight?
I think, what upsets me probably more is when I get young professional women who are working in other parts of the farming industry, when they come up to me and say, how should they deal with it? And that can be challenges online with social media, abuse that they don't feel they have a right of reply on. And that is probably what I find upsetting. For me personally, I think I've learnt to take everything in my stride and it doesn't have any impact. But if you're just setting out in the industry and you're in that professional role, I speak to an alarming number of women who don't know how to cope with it and have asked me to go higher up and have conversations as to how they should deal with it. And that's concerning.
Talking about social media, you said some advice in the next NFU president, don't manage your own social media account. I'm just interested to hear from you in terms of how you've coped with social media and some of the abuse that you've experienced online, and how bad has it got?
I said I'm the first one that's obviously had a Twitter account. It's amazing how sort of new it is, really. And my personal advice would be don't manage your social media account because, or at least turn your notifications off because it is coming up sort of 24/7. And you can't carry out a conversation or right or wrong on social media. I mean, I think for positive stuff, it's fine. And it's got a really good place. For information, it's great. We all grab things in a way that is quicker than going through any other channel. But I think when things start to get heated or accusatory, then it becomes deeply unpleasant. And, if you've had a really, really long day and you get back and you glance at it, it's just not the sort of thing that you want to see before you go to bed or on the back of a busy day, entering into another really busy day. So I think it's important that you look after your own mental health.
And how did you cope with that though?
Well, I think my suggestion speaks volumes probably by saying don't manage your own social media. I think it's difficult. And I represent 46,500 diverse businesses, and I'm always focused on trying to be respectful to all of them, all the different challenges they face. And sometimes when social media is not a platform, I don't think, to be having a lot of those conversations because you never do justice to it.
And for the next NFU president, obviously you said don't manage your social media account, but if there was one other tip that you could give that person, what would it be?
I think enjoy it. It's a huge privilege to lead this organisation. Huge responsibility, I have found it. But whoever comes forward to lead it next will do it their way. And it's part of a team. You are one player in a team, and that's how I've always seen it. And I'm sure that they'll see it the same way.
So what's next for Minette Batters? There's a lot of speculation, rumours. Could you go into politics? Obviously you've said, previously, I just want to get back on the farm and do farming, what you love. But is there anything that you have in the pipeline or something that you would love to do or an organisation to work for?
So obviously I'm an ambassador for Farm Africa. I feel very passionately about our own farming charities here. I've accepted being president of my local show, which is Gillingham and Shaftesbury Show in 2025. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And I don't really have an opinion yet on what I want to do because I think until I get out of this role, I have been 24/7. I've never turned my phone off. I've never turned my emails off. And I genuinely am going to need to reboot myself effectively. And that I am looking forward to going back to the farm. I am going to be there for once for the whole of calving. I've never missed a TB test ever since I've been doing this. But I just need to sort of step out. I think I'll be watching everything like a hawk. I really do. But it's really important to me to be respectful of the organisation, allow the new team to get on and do the job, and I've referred to it a few times, not become a sort of grumpy backbencher from the sidelines. So I just want to leave the NFU to do what it does. So I won't be taking an industry role, as it were. You won't see me as the next chairman of AHDB, put it that way.
Reflecting on the last 10 years, in terms of the state of the industry in agriculture, if we look at it now, did you expect to be where we are, and are you disappointed? There are frustrations and concerns amongst farmers, and we've seen protests happening in Wales. There is it feels like a crunch point at the moment for farmers.
So massive, no. So I never, in 2014, were full members of the European Union. We hadn't even had a referendum. So the journey since leaving the EU, COVID pandemic and war in Ukraine and everything that has gone with that. So massive inflation costs, food security now really front and centre. I've been talking about it for years, but it's absolutely, flashing red right now. And where politics is, you look at what's gone on in Europe, we faced the case of losing red diesel subsidy ourselves. We made the case to Treasury and said we cannot afford to lose this. So I've got total sympathy with the DBV, who I've worked with closely, Jochen Ruppwald, who's their president, all the time we were in COPA. And, they've managed to turn this around, the same as when the Chancellor said, I have listened to the NFU, we will not be axing red diesel subsidy. But you look at what is going on in Wales, and they are fighting for their livelihoods and for their families. And I think that is the message that you get coming out. And, we made that focus on net zero, beating the government target with a red line. And that red line was, we are not downsizing on livestock or dairy. This is about an investment in climate smart agriculture, those policies, those incentives. This is not about taxing us out of existence. And that's why I think farmers in Wales are so frustrated, because they see this. You look at the figures, job losses, financial income losses per farming business. That's unacceptable, and it is a red line, and we will not allow it to be crossed, but we will, and this is what Alid and Abby have been saying, we will sit at the table and we will sort it out. And, we take the same line here in England.
You mentioned in a previous speech in terms of look after the NFU. And I thought that was quite an interesting language there. But in terms of right now, the biggest criticism that gets brought up in hustings is communication. And also in terms of engaging with non-active members and engaging with those younger generation and bringing them on board. Do you feel they're getting it right at the moment here at the NFU with communication?
Well, communication is always a challenge when people, our members, are communicating off so many different platforms. So the vast proportion of our members are not engaging on social media, just because of their age demographic, effectively. They're reliant on email. That's why I do that weekly vlog, so that everybody can access it. So we're constantly fulfilling a very broad requirement within the membership base. I personally think that we can over-communicate. We are communicating all the time. So we tend to judge things on social media, which I think a lot of our members do not engage on social media. And the fundamental thing for us is to make sure we communicate with our members first. And a lot of the challenges to us have been through non-members. And we have an absolute duty of care to be able to communicate a message that has absolute clarity in it to those members, and then obviously the social media platforms and everything else. So no, I don't accept it, because I think, communication is key. It's challenging, and we have different ways that we have to communicate to a very, very diverse membership.
What are you going to miss about the role, and what are you not going to miss? I'm going to miss, I guess, two things enormously. The members, going out and visiting individual farm businesses, going to meetings, the letters, the emails, the messages that I get from, as I say, such a diverse audience. I'm really going to miss them, and I'm really going to miss our professional staff. So the fact that we are an organisation that is led by farmers for farmers, but I think the technical expertise on every area of farming. We employ, with our group secretary relationship with the Mutual, we employ nearly 700 people. It's a huge number of people.
And I just feel very fortunate that I've been given great bullets to fire, effectively. You know, the policy work that we do, it's just been a huge, huge privilege.
In terms of your legacy, what is the one thing that you want to be remembered by?
Oh gosh, what's the one thing? I mean, I have tried as hard as I can to lead and represent. Because if you don't take people with you, you need to represent those members. They are your lifeblood. But at this time, it's been really important to lead and have the solutions to government rather than just say, stop, 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 you know. So putting those solutions forwards. And, you know, I hope I'm remembered as someone who absolutely spoke truth to power at all times, who put solutions forward. And when we were founded in 1908, it was about restoring credibility and integrity with government. And I think as a leader at the NFU, those two words are as important now as they were in 1908, because if you lose integrity, if you lose credibility, you cannot influence. And, you know, I've mentioned the story before, a senior member of staff here, when we had a big council meeting, he said, someone was saying, oh, you know, who opens doors here? And he gesticulated to me and he said, well, she doesn't open them, she just crashes through them. And I thought, as a Southwest livestock farmer, what a great compliment that was. And then I guess what I've worked out here is crashing through the door is the easy bit. It's what you do when you get to the other side of the door that really, really matters. And so often people think that anger and effectively thumping the table sorts it out. And I always say, you know, you can lose your cool, you can leave the room, you can resign, but what do you do the next day? And I've made loads of mistakes. I would be the first to say that. But, you know, I've given everything I personally can to this organisation. That's what I do feel.
And I think people are really interested. The role is relentless, and you are at the table in front of Prime Minister and politicians. In those moments where that frustration is really there, how do you keep your cool?
I suppose you know, count to 10. I mean, I'm not saying there haven't been some pretty robust conversations. I mean, people remember conference last year with Therese Coffey. It felt, you know, fairly acrimonious on that stage. But, you know, she called me afterwards, thanked me for having her and said, would I come and have a drink in Parliament with her to sort out a few issues? So I've always tried to make sure that I stick doggedly to making sure that our members' concerns are heard, first of all with ministers, what they're concerned about is heard, and that it is acted upon, you know, so getting these round tables of the investigations into the supply chain for broiler meat, for eggs and for fresh produce. You know, broiler meat's proving really hard to get over the line. We won't give up on it, you know, we will just keep going until we get it.
And there's been multiple high profile people that obviously you've met through your time at the NFU, but if you could pinpoint one moment, one surreal moment, is there any?
I think definitely that Food Security Summit, the first ever Food Security Summit at number 10 Downing Street, that only came about on the back of the hustings that we had held at Stony Park. You know, Prime Ministers have really mattered in this period of change in legislation to get those things over the line, get a further £1 million for dairy, get a further 4 agricultural attaches, get those investigations into the supply chain, get a year's notice for growers on seasonal workers. Yeah, meetings like that, you think, yeah, all this work has paid off, because it is 24/7. You know, I get calls from the media. The Today programme called me twice last week, once at 10:30, once at midnight, and that's how it goes. So you are literally giving your heart and soul to that job.
It's a really challenging time at the moment for British farmers, but in terms of looking ahead, what is your biggest concern?
You know, the first role of a farmer is producing food. That's what it's all about. That's what I got involved in farming for myself. I've built that business and I want to leave my farm in a better state for my children to hopefully take it on. And I think that's getting lost at the moment. You know, we have a sustainable farming scheme in Wales. We have a sustainable farming incentive scheme here in England. They're all about farming less food and more for the environment. we absolutely have to level up the ambition. It has to be about producing food first, and on the back of that, delivering more for the environment. The danger now is that you transfer farmers onto a road that is truly unsustainable and is totally reliant on public money to prop those businesses up. And we've got to level it up. You know, farmers are food producers. They do many, many other things as well, but it is that food production bit that has been missing. This is why you're seeing the uprising in Europe, and it's why you're seeing people so scared and so frightened in Wales. We're not far away from that in England. I hope pre-election that it will change, but at the moment it's tilted too far one way, and that's about less food. That's not good.
And, you know, we can't shy away from the fact there are concerns around farm assurance, around Red Tractor, and looking back on your tenure, if you knew what was going to happen, and obviously we've had these reviews, would you have left earlier? Because obviously the abuse that you've received in terms of the Red Tractor, and do you have any regrets with that?
No, and I certainly wouldn't have left earlier. I mean, you know, for our members, there are a whole multitude of issues that are going on. You know, our growers are really worried about returns from retailers in an ever more aggressive marketplace, seasonal workers, you know, the broiler sector, the same, you know, dealing with the cost of production. Those are their concerns. For others, particularly in the cereal sector, yeah, assurance has been a concern. But, you know, in the middle of a COVID pandemic, if we'd called for a review of Red Tractor, people have thought we'd lost the plot. So we've been dealing with these big substantive crises, and the time is right now to have the review of Red Tractor, you know, and the NFU is resourcing it, and it's costing a substantial sum of money. But we cannot just focus on what is wrong. We have to focus on what the solutions are. We need to be able to differentiate this market. And the NFU is up for doing that. I've chaired the Farming Organisations Roundtable, which has all farming organisations at it. I went to them the other day and I said, what do you want to add in order to make these terms of reference fit for purpose? We have gone to them, we've asked them. We're paying for it all. I did say financial contributions, welcome from anyone, but it's going to be the AHDB and the NFU that leads this, because we are passionate about getting it right. So I definitely wouldn't have left earlier. I'm delighted that I put that marker down, that it's happening, and now we need to make it work.
Yeah, there are calls from some farmers for the Chief Executive of Red Tractor to stand down. Would you ever consider being a Chief Executive of Red Tractor in a future life?
No, I wouldn't. And I personally think it's incredibly unfair to call for the Chief Exec to stand down. The Chief Exec is responsible to that board. That board dictates what they want to see happen. Whether we like it or not, currently that board is whole chain owned. So you have everybody from the farming unions right the way through to the BRC, and everybody in the middle. They're all vested interests, they all want different things. But you cannot blame one man. You've got to play the ball in all of this and not the person. So I absolutely don't think it's fair how he's been treated. And you've got to ask yourself, who would want that job if it did come up after what has happened? You know, we need the best people coming into this industry to do those jobs.
If you had to describe your last 10 years in 3 words, what would they be?
Oh my goodness, it has been absolutely flat out. I mean, it has been so busy and so fast moving. But above all else, I think it's been an enormous privilege to do it. And it's just thanks to our farmer members that I've had the chance to lead the fight on their behalf.
But 3 words?
I can't sum it up in 3 words.
We tried.
It's been extraordinary. It's been the toughest, and it's been the privilege. Those 3 words.
Minette Batters, thank you very much.
Thank you.